The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, this is my second taping of a new podcast. A new podcast that goes by the name of Venture in a new town with new people.
Lovely.
So I was fortunate enough to find myself, a friend of mine I met here in town.
Yes.
Texted me, says there's this open mic at Riff Raff that we could go to this Friday, whatever, a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Didn't know what I was getting into, what the vibe would be. Got there and it was a really mixed bag.
Yes.
And I saw one other musician to start with, but wasn't really sure if music was going to be part of the night, which is what I was going for. And then in the middle of the set, we got to see a performance by my guest today, Whitney Sanchez, who is a vocal instructor, a yoga instructor, yoga teacher, as well as a performing artist, singer, and also songwriter, I gather.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, it was great to like meet you as another performer and to see you do your thing in this new town where I don't know any other artists. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was so nice to be there. I've been to other open mics, and when I sang there, it was just a lovely vibe and lovely energy, and just hearing everyone's stories and then hearing your song, I was like, this is really different, and there's like no ego involved, which is a very lovely thing to be surrounded by. It's like people and artists and creatives who are doing something without so much ego present, and that is sometimes rare.
Yeah.
To come across.
It's interesting that you point that out, because that is true. That is how it felt. And it was like, I think something about, well, I mean, it was a small room. It wasn't it was still a crowded and like attentive room, but it was an environment that was, I mean, I guess when you think about how many people were there and how many performed, it might have been half performers.
It was, yeah. I would say so, yeah.
It was like peers in a way.
For sure. And I just remember like looking out in the crowd and people being like just looking at you really attentively. And that is something that, you know, you get sometimes, but you don't get that all the time. And so like I feel like, I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt heard and seen in that space, which is cool. Because you don't get that all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure as you are. I'm the type of artist that when I perform songs that I write, especially, I don't do that in bars very much or whatever. I try to limit it to rooms where there's more of a direct connection between the artist and the audience, because it's just more consistent with how I think of what it is that I do, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because like your songwriting is the one song that I heard was like very much like a story. And that's definitely, it went super well with the theme of the night, obviously at Riff Raff. But I feel like in those settings, you just want to sit and listen. And that's really beautiful to kind of experience too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so as we were discussing a minute ago, this podcast is a cool opportunity for me to like get to know people like yourself in this unique way that gives us a chance to really like kind of dive deep in a different way with a different approach than what I would normally otherwise have. So, so if you'll humor me, I'd like to just like go back to some of your story so I can get to know your origin as an artist and everything. I'd like to know where you're from and how you kind of, how where you're from led you to be involved in the things that you do.
Ooh, it's a long story. Starting point. So like I was born in New York City. I was born in Washington Heights specifically, and then lived in Astoria, Queens. And just being in New York City, you're surrounded by a lot of music, and especially because of my ethnicity. So my mom is Brazilian and Portuguese, or Azorean, so like part of the Azores. And my dad is Dominican. So just being around cultures that involve a lot of music in them. And plus my mom loves music. My dad is a producer too, and a DJ, a house DJ and producer. So it's just, I think naturally, obviously like culturally was part of, you know, it's just in my blood. But I think I saw Christina Aguilera sing one of the songs on like MTV or something. And I just wanted to be that. I don't know why. I was just like, oh, she's on MTV. And she looks really cool. And I want to be like Christina Aguilera, but I didn't know I could sing just yet. And it was just like a fantasy almost. So I always loved music. I loved dancing. It was something that I always loved experiencing. And I was a dancer in the beginning of like my creative journey. So I did a lot of ballet and contemporary and like jazz and all that fun stuff you do as a kid. Then one day I just like started singing in the car to Get Lifted, which is I think John Legend's first album. And it felt really good to sing it. And I think that was the moment. And my mom also kind of was like, hey, you can sing. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can sing. And so that was the moment where I felt like it was a natural ability. Obviously, it wasn't like to the point, you know, where like a super skilled singer sings, but it's something that felt really natural and really nice in my body. And so that's when I first started to connect my my fantasy with being like Christina Aguilera to the actual reality of like what I could do. And then, you know, like I started taking singing lessons, blah, 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 blah. And that was fine. And in high school, it was okay. I didn't really feel like I belonged in the music, like the musicals or like the music department or whatever in my school. I didn't feel supported by my teacher or by the leaders at school that were part of the music and theater department. And so kind of like my insecurity started there. And like I think my dream at that point in my life was I want to be on Broadway. That's like my dream. And I always loved that idea, but I didn't feel confident enough. I never felt good enough. I never felt like just supported. And so my confidence sank and my desire sank to want to do that. And so I didn't go to college for music. I didn't do any of that actually. And I took like a 5-year break from music completely. And I was just like a bedroom singer. I sang in my bedroom. My friends knew I sang, but I was kind of just like, And then, yeah, so I didn't believe in pursuing it for a very long time. And then I moved to London. I moved to London, forgot the year, but I was doing a master's degree in London. And so I moved there. Lived there for 5 years, but I got into a relationship with someone who is a musician, and experiencing him doing that kind of pulled my strings again to wanting to pursue music, and just witnessing what, you know, he was involved in and his friends and what they were doing. I was like, oh, that's something that I want to do. And he did a lot of, you know, it was just a lot of that. And since then I've dated a lot of people, not a lot of people. What am I talking about? I've dated a few people who are musicians. Seems to be a theme there. So it's kind of like, you know, I've dated people who are musicians, and I feel like I've dated them because they're kind of pulling something out of me a little bit, almost like mirroring my desires.
Yeah.
So I kind of got that cue, and I was like, right, I just got to do it. So instead of kind of getting it from a partner and being jealous of them because they're doing the thing that I want to do, I'm just going to fucking do it. Do you know what I mean? And so during the pandemic, I was with somebody who was very supportive and really allowed me to, you know, go in that direction. So he gave me, you know, a way to use Ableton or Logic, one of those things. And so I just started being silly and creating things. And that's how I started the whole songwriting thing, or just like even learning how to produce a little bit. And then I started getting into singing as well. Like in London was the time where I got into some like musical groups, and not really like, you know, it was just like more of ensembles and just like ways of expressing yourself vocally and musically. And was it during the pandemic? Yeah, it was a little bit during the pandemic, like I think a year in or two. I don't know, actually. My whole timing of the pandemic is skewed. But anyways,
same.
So it's just weird. But I started performing at like farmers markets and things like that, and meeting other musicians. And then I was just like, I am not doing the work that I want to do. I was in a 9-to-5 job. It was nice and everything, but I just wanted to do the music thing, and I wasn't financially supported. I don't have any family in London. It's all friends, and it's just like London is hard. London is very hard. And it was a struggle. So I came back home, and I was like, I want to focus on music. And I think since then it's been a struggle. It hasn't been very easy. But it's definitely been a journey of like discovering, all right, which direction, what do I want to get into? Because in music it's one umbrella, and you can go so many different directions. And I think I'm just at a point of my life now where I'm like, right, I need to put a pin in one thing or two things, and that's it. because my brain can go, every direction.
How long have you been back from London?
2.5 years.
Okay.
Feels longer, but yeah, 2.5 years.
So, and I was also putting together, you had mentioned, so you were born in New York.
Yeah.
What was your connection to Providence, to Rhode Island, prior to now?
Yeah, so my parents are from here.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents moved to New York, and my mom raised me from New York City, until I was like turning 6, so around 5.5, 6. And then when I started first grade or second grade, one of those grades, I moved here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about confidence for a second.
Sure.
I just noticed that as you were talking, one of the first things you pointed out was the impact of confidence.
Yes.
And like what it has on the way that you perceive your trajectory, the way you perceive
100%.
your sort of like ability to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Why did that enter in, like the lack of confidence thing
Mm-hmm.
for you? You had mentioned came from a time when you were in school and stuff.
Yeah.
How did it get there? What happened? Why did that enter into your life?
Sure. So I think I was very shy as a child, number one. I was extremely shy. I have a very different personality to what I had as a kid. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't feel like opening my mouth ever. But I was very shy. And I think singing especially is extremely vulnerable. And when you're putting yourself out there as like an 11 or 12-year-old and doing auditions for a play with that kind of, and I'm also very sensitive. So with that kind of personality, and then I didn't do well in the audition, or like I didn't get casted in this one musical or whatever. And that was the kind of thing. And I didn't get a reason why, or it was just more of like, I just didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? I didn't get into this one thing. So it was rejection, basically. And so once you get that rejection at such a young age and you don't really get the support for it, especially when you're sensitive, and there's a certain storyline that goes along with, or stereotypes that go along with shy children. People love like charismatic kids, which is true sometimes, and not so much the shy kids. And so that was part of my story that I created in my head. And yeah, that kind of just transferred into my middle school and high school years.
And it sounds like you carried that for a while, especially if it was kind of keeping you from wholeheartedly thinking about music in the way that you do now.
Yeah.
Until you were like in London. It sounds like you carried that with you for quite a bit.
I think even until present day, I'm working on it completely. It's part of like my shadow work, which is, it's a real thing. And I think I'm definitely doing it. And shadow work for me is doing things like actively going to open mics and getting on a stage and doing it.
Yeah.
And not listening to the stories of like, because there was a part of me that I walked to the door at Riff Raff and I was like, I can turn around right now. And there was
Really?
a part of me that was like, I don't really want to do this. But a part of me is like, we need to change the story. And so that's the reason why I kind of, yeah.
Damn.
Did that.
I never would have guessed that, by the way, from
Really?
your just like being on stage. I wouldn't have thought that at all.
Yeah. It's real.
Ah, man, you said need to change the story. And
Yeah.
you also mentioned shadow work, and I like, where do these terms come from for you?
Yeah.
I know a few people probably that are familiar with the term shadow work,
Yeah.
but it might not be something that every single person embraces.
No.
What made you decide instead of continue? I mean, you talked about London, you talked about the experience of music kind of calling towards you, but
Yeah.
what makes you willing to be like, well, I recognize that there's this thing keeping me from the things I want to do, and instead of just accept that
Yeah.
and live vicariously through these other experiences,
Yeah.
what makes you be like, no, I'm willing to change the story?
Because I have one life to live. And that's how I think about it. It's like, I'm spiritual in the aspect of like, I know my soul is a thing that will last forever. But as Whitney Sanchez, she's only here one lifetime.
I love that. Very good.
Yeah.
How did you like London, just like broadly speaking?
At the time, so the reason why I went to London to begin with is because there's this Amanda Bynes film called What a Girl Wants. And that was like one of my favorite films as a kid. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to meet this English guy called Oliver and we're going to fall in love. None of that happened. I didn't meet Oliver. I fell in love a few times, but not with Oliver. I liked it. It wasn't, so I lived in Paris before for a year. I was an au pair in Paris, and Paris is, to me, very beautiful. It's aesthetically very pleasing. I'm a Libra, so I love looking around and seeing beautiful things. And then I got to London, and I got off the train at King's Cross, and I walked outside, and it was so gray, and it wasn't Paris. And I was like, where am I? And it wasn't beautiful to me at the time. But I had a really beautiful journey of meeting a lot of beautiful people, and I have a lot of friends there, and I miss them a lot. And I think about it now. I used to love riding my bike through London, especially during the pandemic. I started riding my bike, and that was my favorite thing to do, was just ride my bike through the back streets of London. And I'm noticing here I can't really do that in the same way. And I didn't love London. I had a lot of complaints about it at the time, but I think about it. And even as I was driving today, I was like, should I move back to London? Yeah. A part of me wants to move back. But a part of me is like, that chapter is closed. And no. So yeah, my heart is definitely very connected to London. And there's things that, there's things that are very special to me. So yeah, I do love London. Period. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you love Providence?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think I'm trying. I feel like I'm in a relationship where it's very complicated, where I felt very rejected from Providence for a long time. And I also think I rejected it at the same time because I thought it was rejecting me. And yeah, I think I'm trying. I'm really trying with Providence. There's things that I like about it, and there's always things that I discover, and there's things that I appreciate. But I'm always like, is this enough? And sometimes I think that's my own world. And so sometimes I don't know what's real. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because this is one of the things I knew I was going to ask you before getting here. I know what it's like to be a musician in North Carolina, and to be a working musician who's like trying to make a career of things down there. This is a really new market for me. And I'm curious what your impression, I don't know how to best ask the question other than just be like, I want you to tell me what it's like to be an artist, particularly a musician up here and in Providence.
I think it depends on the genre of music. And I think, it really depends on your networking and community building skills. Because Providence is very small. It's limited in the types of the spaces. So it's not like London or New York City where all these places are, you can sing, on the metro or down in the tube, those type of places. Here, it's not like that. So you have, like a Skew, or you have Cortland Club, or you have the Parlor, which is a great space too. Like, you have so many different places which offer music. I wish there were more spaces though, but it's definitely accessible. And I think especially because of the music that you're doing, it's going to be very well accepted. Like the singer-songwriter scene here, I think is very nice. And like the folky scene is very nice. I mean, we have the Newport Jazz Festival and the Folk Festival. Yeah. And Newport is great too. Have you checked out Newport?
I have visited Newport, yeah.
Yeah, Newport has a good music scene.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I've been told so far. And I'll tell you, maybe you can help me figure out what I'm missing. Because I'm not having a bad experience at all.
Okay.
But my impression is probably a little limited.
Okay.
So my story, when I was like planning to move up here, Newport was one of the places I was looking at. Okay. And I ended up in a conversation with a musician there who was renting out a room. Okay. He was like, what kind of music do you do? And I gave him the spiel, the storytelling, folk music, and he thought it was cool. But he said, really, Providence is going to be the place for somebody like you more so than here, because here is going to be more like when the summertime hits, all the tourism hits Newport, and like if you're a cover band, or if you're basically, he said, if you're a cover band or a tribute band, you're going to have work all summer long, and you'll get paid really, really well. But for original act, probably not as much of a demand as there might be in Providence. Right. And as I've jumped into Providence, I have noticed there is a lot of originality in the arts. A lot of there's actually a lot of what I would call throwback to like 90s vibes, like stylistically, fashion wise, just like I go to this punk show, and it looked like I was in the 90s. It was just like, so I don't know, like a Nirvana concert or something.
That makes sense.
Punkish bands and like loud and like kind of in your face, but a little different, a little pretty.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been seeing, I think, a lot on the surface of Providence, at least in the places that I've been. And I haven't figured out, aside from Askew, where I'll be next week, I guess.
Yeah.
I haven't really figured out where the songwriters are, where the folk scene is, like what that looks like. Do people play in coffee shops? Do people play in clubs? Or are they trying to be like ticketed events, or are they free? Like, I wonder what it works like here.
Yeah. So for me, I'm in this place where I'm new to performing my original music, especially because I'm a slow songwriter and it takes me time to finish my songs. But what I've noticed going out to gigs, sometimes they're mostly ticketed for the ones that I have been to. Some of them are free, but mainly ticketed. AS220 is a great spot, a great organization to know. Yeah, so those, I think what they were saying is true. I think Newport is, they have the cover band thing. And I think that's, to be honest, I think in general, you're going to get more money, period.
Yeah.
With playing covers, because even when I was in London, I was like, you're going to get paid well for playing covers more so than your original music, just because that's how the world works, apparently. So yeah, but the spaces that we have, like Askew is a great place, like we mentioned. And those, I can't believe I can't remember the name of this place. It starts with an M. I'll get it to you. But anyway, those are great places. In the Parlor. Have you been there?
I haven't been to the Parlor.
Yeah, the Parlor on North Main. That's a really good space to know. They have an open mic on Wednesdays. Trying to think. Oh, the Blue Room in Cranston. Definitely go there.
The Blue Room. Haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, definitely go. A lot of great musicians, and the owner Jen is amazing.
Well, cool. I'll save the talk, the shop talk, but I will dive into all that.
Yeah.
So, at this stage in your life, sounds like you've had an eclectic and mixed relationship with different music forms, different forms of creativity. Is dance something that's still a part of your life as well as music?
Yes, but not in the same way. So like I used to go to a lot of dance classes as a child, and I like to, especially when I'm in New York, because I went to school in New York, and a lot of my friends live there. So I like to go visit as often as I can. I haven't been there in like a year though, so that's a problem. Anyway, I like to go take dance classes there. I know there's some more dance classes here, but I love like dancing samba. And dancing, like to house music. So taking house classes, like house dance classes, and like Afro beats and dance hall. I love all that stuff. So if I can get into a classroom or into a dance class, then I will. And it's just something that I like, especially because there's so much energy in my body, and especially because I'm naturally very anxious and very sensitive. I think it's a really nice way of allowing that energy to move. And music, because music is just vibration basically, and frequency. And so when I listen to one song and I'm really upset or I'm really sad, and I listen to something that's the opposite or just energetically very different from that, it pulls me out of that completely. And so dancing and listening to the song in that one vibration changes my mood drastically. So that's the reason why, I like to have it in my life.
One of my when you know me well, a theme that you might learn from me is that so my grandmother's Cuban.
Oh, okay.
And I have this thing where I identify with Cuban heritage and stuff, but I don't feel like I have much experience with it or know about it or whatever. It's like there's this alienation there, this separation. And one of my what I consider a great tragedy in my life is kind of an inability to embrace dance, an inability to embrace or not embrace, but to feel a part of like the Hispanic side of me, because it just wasn't there, because it just kind of wasn't a part of our upbringing and the culture that we were in. We were in North Carolina, and like there were plenty of Hispanics that were around us, but not Cubans, and not anything related to music. Like Cuban music was not a part of our upbringing at all.
Yeah. So you say like inability. So like what's the inability? Because that seems like I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it feels like in my head. It feels like this brick wall that's there. That's like, you don't know how to dance, so you don't dance. You can't dance, kind of thing. That's like that's the thread. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good news. You can always try.
True.
You can always try. And there's a really amazing, I mean, there's a lot of Hispanic people here and a lot of Hispanic communities here.
Yeah.
And like, you know, salsa has like, you have different ways of dancing, and like Puerto Ricans and Cubans dance it very differently. There's a whole rhythmic thing that's different. But listen, it's the same thing at the end of the day. So you can always take a dance class. They have like salsa on the pedestrian bridge sometimes.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, Brown. There's tons of like dance classes where like even just beginners, just go, have some fun. And just like I would even challenge you to like change the story, like how I did at Riff Raff, or just try to change it and just take a class and see how it is without judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see how it feels to like connect with like your ancestors in that way.
Man, I love this phrase, change the story.
Yeah.
So what do you want your story to be?
That's something that I'm thinking about a lot lately. I feel like my third eye is blocked. So my way of like connecting to that is it's not blocked. It's just I gotta work with it a little bit more. I think it's just like it's within this process of having, so I have this thing where my consistency is showing up for myself by performing every week, just consistently. I don't know for how long, but I do it once or twice a week, every week, just to change the story. And the story is that I belong on stage, that I belong, period. That I am free, that I have confidence. And that's the big one, that I am confident. And like feeling that in my body, and that it doesn't come out from an external place. It's already within me, that I already have. It's just believing in it. And so that's the story. It's not like, I think the judgment in my mind is if I'm performing, like this happened last week, I was performing and I was just looking at people's faces, and it's like, do they think I'm weird? Do they think like what it like? And so not really tuning into that when I'm performing. I'm a performer and a vocalist and an artist who is connected and who's in the flow, and who feels confident and grounded in what I'm conveying and what I'm singing and what I'm, just expressing. And it's not necessarily about the ego, which I've been so attached to all this time.
And kind of reminding yourself of these things when those other inconsistent feelings kind of creep up. Is that how you describe it? Yeah,
or just like, I mean, it's changing the consistency. So I want the consistency to be like, I'm courageous, I'm confident, I belong. Like that's a fact. Rather than the fact is rather than right now, I'm noticing that the story is I don't belong. People don't like me. I'm not good enough. So changing the story, and that would be the story, to feel in my body. And that's what I'm trying to change, because it's all a somatic thing.
I'll tell you, one thing I really appreciate about what you're saying is the honesty and the transparency in it, because I think so often with artists, trying to project that the personification of like what satisfies the ego is what the artist does to like show their artistry, instead of saying, look, I recognize about myself that like I don't always feel like I belong, and I'm trying to tell myself that it's okay for me to feel like I do.
Yeah.
It's like they don't quite get that part. I'm not talking shit about artists. I'm just saying, like, I know this about my younger self, is that I didn't quite understand the motivation behind this great force within me to try and demonstrate how much I belong, or try and demonstrate how much I have something creative to say, or something like that.
Yeah.
You sound like you're very, I guess what I'm saying is you sound like you're very aware of these, like, these subconscious motivations or something that you have.
Yeah, completely, because it's like it's taken a lot away from me. It's taken a lot of time, it's taken a lot of energy, and it's created this like it's this part of me that's the shadow. And even in saying that, I'm rejecting it completely, but it's this part of me that already feels rejected. And instead of projecting that, kind of not listening to that voice so much, and just changing that completely so I can show up and, like in a way that's, I don't want to show up in this place of like, I always have to impress. Like, who am I impressing for what? Like, what's the outcome of that? I think the bigger picture here is like, how can I be my most authentic self? So there's that connection. And that's what the point is. It's like an energetic flow. And so I can be of service. So it's the point of it is so I can be of service, and not necessarily like just serve myself. It's serving the bigger picture, everyone else just besides me, but also including me and other people.
How do you know when a thought is hitting you? How do you know how to distinguish between it being consistent with the story that you don't want to tell yourself versus when you need to change the story that's unfolding or like help guide it in the way that you want it to go?
When I feel like I want to cry because I feel like I'm wounded or I'm in the victim mode, that's when I need to shift it. When it's like, no one likes you, you're not good enough, that type of stuff. I've gone through really dark things when it comes to self-harm. And so when I know I'm going in that direction, I have to shift back and change it. That's when I know I'm in the wrong direction. There's also like when it's talking me out of something that doesn't allow me to walk in the direction of the person I want to be. So when I'm taking a step back, or when it's not allowing me to do the thing that I need to lean into courage with, then that's when I know that's the voice being like, stay small, as a way of protecting myself. And so that's like, right, is that in the direction of the person I want to be, or is this allowing me to stay stagnant or walk backwards?
I very much relate to that. Now I do anyway. I think at a different point I wouldn't have, but at this stage of my life, as I was telling you, this is kind of a weird, like, taking risks time in life, and I know that voice, and I recognize that voice as well, and I recognize the one that will sometimes tell you, you can take the easy way out, or you can take the comfortable way out, right. I think,
yeah.
And stay in this place that instead of going to this territory that you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the thing about walking into Riff Raff. I knew it completely. It was very apparent to me. I was so anxious about it because I did not know what to expect on the other side. I've never been to the open mic before. My thing before was always going to the place, or just going to the space first, or the event, and checking it out, just scoping it out. Like, is this just seeing how it feels? This time I didn't do that. I was just like, I'm just going to show up. And that completely terrified me because I didn't know what it was going to be like. I had no clue. And so like the uncertainty bit, because I'm into tarot readings. I'm like, I need to know my future. And I'm trying not to do that, but it's a part of me that can't let go of not knowing. But I think that's the way to go, because once you do that, you allow to see the truths that come out a little bit more so, or just that need to be seen and, need to be acknowledged. And then you just get out of that, that way of thinking that's just keeping you stuck. So I feel like uncertainty is really fucking scary, especially for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people. And that's, in just little tiny ways you can just change it, or just like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go out of your comfort zone with that.
Yeah, I suffer from the future as well, which makes no sense. But
it does,
for
though.
some reason it does. And it's alluring. Sorry about that.
Okay.
It's tempting. It's irresistible sometimes.
It is
to be consumed by the future that hasn't unfolded yet.
It hasn't, and so that's also the thing about about music as well. That's really daunting for me. It's like improvising and being in the present moment with it. That for me is super terrifying, because I'm like, I don't want to fuck up. And there's so much space to fuck up when you're improvising and being in the moment. But I think that's when like meditation and just being in it is the most rewarding, because that's when mistakes happen. And I love mistakes. I say that now. Part of me is like, we don't like mistakes, but true magic comes from mistakes.
Before we get too far off, a lot of what you've said is, I think, kind of illuminated your relationship with this stuff. It sounds like you're very aware of yourself, aware of like your body in a room, and you're just like the way that you feel and the way that your ideas affect your overall mood, all sorts of things that I can't help but assume probably have some relationship with the whole yoga thing. And I don't know anything about yoga, so you'll have to talk to me like I'm a moron. But
that's okay.
Where did that relate? Like, since you teach yoga, you must be knowledgeable about it. Where did your relationship with all of that begin, and does that have a relationship with your creativity?
I think so. So yoga, my relationship with yoga is was very inconsistent. I started when I lived in New York City. There was a place called St. Mark's, and it was Yoga for the People or something like that. I don't know how I'm just losing my memory right now. But anyways, I used to go there. It's donation based. And I went there after college or after class, or it was very close to my dorm building. And I would go with a friend or two. And I was like, I am so anxious, but I need to. Everyone's like, yoga helps with anxiety, relaxes you. And I'm like, yeah, I need that. So I went and I never really felt it. I was like, why am I, people were sweating next to me and I was like, people are huffing and puffing. And I'm like, is this really what yoga is about? Like, I just never really connected the dots with it and never felt, I just didn't get it. I didn't get yoga for a very long time. And then, I went away to London and blah, blah, blah. And I did yoga there. Like I have a good friend who teaches yoga. And so I went to her classes and they were always great. And I love them. But I still was not like getting, like, I remember this conversation we had. I was like, why is everyone telling me when to breathe? I hate that. And I didn't get it, that's really, it's part of it. That's part of, there's a way where you move your body and you're inhaling and then you move your body a certain way and that's exhaling. It's part of a moving meditation. And I just never got it. And then I moved here and I was, when you live in big cities, you're always walking. You're always doing that. I was bike riding, walking. So I didn't really need to like have a membership for a gym or anything like that. And so I came here and I was driving everywhere and I was just noticing that I was not feeling good in my body and I needed some movement. And I like yoga and I noticed that there's Westside Yoga over here and they have like a $30 for 30 days, which is a great deal. And so that makes it really nice, especially as an artist and if you have like a lower income, for you to just check it out and to see how consistent your practice can be. And I was just interested in consistency. I have like an obsession with consistency because I think it's so beautiful. Anyway, I showed up consistently to this one studio and I just noticed how much I loved it. I noticed what I didn't like. I noticed what I did like. I noticed the differences it provided for my body as a singer, the strength in my breath, and also how good I felt after a class. And it provided more wisdom for me about my body that I couldn't really access when I wasn't in touch with it or when I wasn't moving it. So yoga was the one thing that really helped me to stay in tune with my body. And especially as a singer, my body is my instrument. So it was providing that for me. So I just had this desire. I think one of my teachers was talking about how interesting it is to have the teacher's perspective of the yoga class. Like I'm taking the student, I'm always having the perspective as a student because that's how I'm taking these classes as a student. And then he talked about the perspective of being a teacher. And I was just like very curious about it. And I was just like, okay, it piques my curiosity when I should just do a yoga teacher training. At this point in my life, I thought about moving to Barcelona and I was saving money to move to Barcelona and I changed my mind. And I was just like, I'm just going to go to Tenerife, which is part of the Canary Islands, which is also part of Spain. And so I went there and did my yoga teacher training and I learned so much. In terms of the philosophy, I need to learn a lot more. But the philosophy is what I'm falling in love with even more than asana, which is the physical practice of yoga. I love asana. I think it does amazing things. It's not, it makes your body look cute, yes, but it's not just that, it's a lot of things. I have ADHD, and so it allows me to really be in focus when I need to be, and to practice focusing, period. But yoga philosophy is what's helping me a lot when it comes down to performing and doing this whole shadow work stuff. Because, you have the 8 limbs of yoga, and it's not a religion, it's not a cult. It's just a way of moving through life. And you have ahimsa, it's nonviolence, and it's nonviolence to everything around you, including yourself. Whenever we compare, that's violence to the self. And so it's like, even things like that, I'm like, right, ahimsa, nonviolence, no comparing, none of this stuff that's always allowing that's just not good for you. It's toxic. And there's always so many, there's yoga is just so expansive and it allows you to really get to your center and allows you to see and to access the truth of yourself much more so than I think for me, any religion can, in my perspective. And it's not a religion, it's just a practice. And that's what I like. There's no you don't have rules that you really have to abide by. It's not like really strict, like you're going to go to heaven or hell if you don't listen to this. It's not like that. It's just something where it's a path and that's all it is. Yeah.
I feel that physical fitness for artists is super underrated and often overlooked. And I don't know about all the time. I mean, I think on the end where artists make a whole bunch of money, and so they have a little bit more freedom to choose what kind of, they have what you might assume would be more freedom to choose what kind of life they want to have,
Yeah.
or they can afford.
Yes.
Fitness probably is a higher priority, but I know for me it wasn't a priority for the longest time until I was in my until recently, until my early 30s, and I started really like wondering and like I started reassessing what mattered, and started to think for maybe the first time ever that maybe health was as important as creativity. And I had never really prioritized it before until not very long ago.
Okay.
Till like a year and a half ago or something like that.
And so what do you find different now after
Well,
practicing that?
One of the things was I didn't want to acknowledge that I didn't feel good about my relationship with just like my body and everything, my fitness and my sense of my own health, my own sense of if I was going to live a long time or not. And I didn't think about the fact that I was taking all that on stage with me.
Yeah.
I was going on stage with negative feelings toward myself.
Interesting.
And not really ever considering what that was putting out to the rest of the room.
Yeah.
And I think I notice now, going on stage with having made the decision that I give a shit about my own relationship with my own health, I notice that I feel differently taking myself on stage, that I'm going on stage as a person who wants to live life and like enjoy it, rather than a person who is kind of like not willing to address that question.
Yeah. Avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how like physical practice can help you in so many ways. And like we think about like the gym and like gym rats, and like people just want to get like, you know, really big, and it's not about that. Like, I think physical practice is spiritual at the same time, and it doesn't have to be, but it can be for reasons like this. Like it connects with so many other things, and that's beautiful within itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that consistency is beautiful.
Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Because it allows you to see opportunities and things that you might not see without the practice of consistency. Practice for me is a beautiful word. I hated practice when I was a kid. I hated homework as a kid, which I'm sure many kids did or do. But I'm noticing now with practicing something consistently, you're able to grow self-esteem. You're able to see the possibilities of a lot of things. And that's what consistency brings. It just brings possibilities, period. And it's discipline, and it's not discipline in the sense of like, you must do this. It's discipline in doing something that you like doing and noticing how healthy it is for you, and maybe through consistency, you see how bad it is for you.
Yeah.
And you see how like being on Instagram every single day is not great for me. It's consistent though. It's very consistent, but it's showing truths. And that's what it's showing reality.
I like
consistency.
that.
Yeah.
So for you, it sounds like consistency kind of tests reality in a way or something.
It's information.
Yeah.
It provides more information.
I love discipline. I think of it as like, there's this quote that goes around that I think I've heard interpreted different ways, but it's something about like how discipline is, in simple terms, discipline is freedom itself.
Yes.
And I think in a whatever goofy example of that is just something as simple as like, can you keep a schedule? If you can be disciplined about a schedule, that means you can decide to do anything you want at the time that you want. Instead of whatever, if someone says, can you do dinner at 7? And if you think to yourself, I know I'm habitually the type of person who just like I won't do the things that are necessary to get me there by that time. If it's an important detail that you get there by that time, you know, then you're narrowing those opportunities for yourself. I think that's what I like about discipline, is something like, if I can decide what I do, especially within the field of art, if I can decide that I'm going to record, if I can decide that I'm going to make beats, or I can decide that I'm going to like have time dedicated to writing, then that's like the same thing as deciding that that's what I'm doing as a career or something like that. It's just commitment to the craft, a commitment to like your own your own will to do the thing that you say you want to do.
Right. Yeah. Like everything is a choice. And everything, like when I look at my days now and it's not like, oh, it's doom, or whatever, like, something's going to go bad if I don't make the right choice. But we have to, I think for me, especially is because I have ADHD, I have to be very conscious of the choices that I make because my brain wants to take me in every sort of direction. And so discipline allows for that focus of building something or building a life that you want to build or building anything. And it's really, really important. And one of my ex-partners is extremely disciplined in his craft. And that's what I really loved about him because he showed me that completely. I mean, he doesn't suffer from ADHD, so there's a difference there. But he acknowledged it in me, which is great because it helped me. But that was something that I really honored about him and I learned because it was really beautiful to see in him. And just seeing the fruits of that labor of discipline for him.
Before we start to run out of time, I guess, it sounds like you have lived a lot of places. As you know, as I mentioned, this is the first time I ever decided to like leave my hometown and just step into a whole new community and just say, hopefully they'll like me enough or whatever that looks like. Hopefully my skills will carry me somewhere. Yeah. So this is new territory for me. You're a little more learned in it. You're a little more experienced with new territories, new places. Yeah. Where all have you lived?
I've New York City, Providence, Paris, London. Those are all the places that I lived.
And then you did your teaching session off the coast of Spain.
Oh, I also lived in Seville for 4 months. It was study abroad. Best time of my life, yeah.
Did you say best year?
Best time of my life, yeah. It was great.
Yeah, I bet. What was that? I mean, what was that like?
It was like complete freedom. Like I didn't have to care about anything. Like, I had like a big stash of cash from my loans, which I'm still paying off. Anyway, chose to spend that on everything. Went to Morocco, went here, went there. Did all these things, ate candy for dinner, like just did just like lived the life and, experienced things that, I was just how old was I? 20 years old. And I was just living life. I made a lot of mistakes. I spoke Spanish. I lived with a Spanish family that didn't, they didn't speak English. I ate rat. I remember going into the house and seeing a dead rabbit. And I'm not that type of person who like goes hunting for stuff. So, I'm not like from the country or anything like that. I'm a city girl basically. And so I just saw a rabbit hanging in the house and I'm like, I'm eating that. And I did. And it was delicious. I don't really eat animals like that now, but yeah, no, I have Spain tattooed on my body. And I question if I want to change that now just because, colonizing and it's a thing. Yeah, but I love Spain, and I always feel tied to Spain in one way or another.
Did they speak a different kind of Spanish than you?
Yes, yeah. In Seville, they have a very particular accent, and it's quite interesting because I'm half Dominican, and Dominicans don't say the S.
Oh, interesting.
And in Seville, they don't either. But it's obviously with the lisp and more Spanish than Dominican accent and Spanish accent, very different from each other, but it's very southern in the sense like southern Spain. They're different than north, and Spain is small, not too small, but they have different accents, and it's interesting to hear them once like you can distinguish the different accents.
So of your travels and of your time as an artist, dealing with your shadow, dealing with the things that you've confronted about yourself.
Yeah.
What are some of the great lessons that you've confronted and some of the great lessons that you've like kind of learned so far in your life?
I love the story. I like the idea that you can always like change the story. Like when I think of Rebecca, do you know Rebecca Black?
Yeah.
She's completely changed the story. I only think about that song Friday. But now I look at her on her Instagram and she's doing great things. Like she's changed the story completely, and you have the power to do that whenever. And so I think like just knowing the power of changing the story and walking in the direction that you want to, and you have the ability to do so, and not necessarily listening to the stories in your head, which is very easy to do, which is a process within itself. But once you have that awareness, you move forward. And then anything is really possible. I like the idea of anything is possible if you put in the work. Yeah.
This word story is one that's been in my life a lot recently. I wonder if there are certain stories from your life that are like the most important stories that might come to mind. I feel like that's a really difficult thing to just throw at you, but just like your rabbit story.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if from your time in New York, from London, from Brazil, from Spain, if there are stories that you have that are just like super important to who you have become.
Oh, I don't know. It's interesting because I think out of all of the places that I've lived in, I feel like Providence and having my time in Providence is the story that I want to live with rather than the stories that I've lived in, that I've been living with or following through in those other cities. Yeah.
That's interesting. What makes you say that?
Because like what I mentioned before, like Providence, I felt like always rejected me. Or Rhode Island always rejected me, so I rejected it, and I always want to run away. I have this, even today, I was like, oh, I want to, like what I said before, maybe I should move back to London. A part of me just wants to run away. Partly because, I've gone through a recent heartbreak thing, and so that's, even me saying that out loud makes me want to, like, why Whitney? Why are you saying that? But anyways, I have this idea of, like, I've been rejected, so I want to run. And so Providence, I'm changing the story by staying. And I feel like every other place I've chosen to run a little bit. It's my place of going to, and it's not like, of course there's exploration. I've been completely courageous going to these places, and a lot of crazy and weird things have happened in those cities. Many toxic things. But I think, I don't know. I think just being in Providence and changing the story by staying and not necessarily running away. Oh, I guess I have a story for you. Yeah, here we go. So I lived in an apartment. My last place I lived was in Tottenham, which is, I don't know if you know Tottenham, but it's low-key the hood. It's the hood. They have like Tottenham Spurs, which is a big football or soccer team. So it's very famous for that, but it's also the hood, which I don't mind. I love the hood, but it's not a place to walk to at night by yourself type of thing. Anyways, I lived there. And there's things I love about, places that are considered the hood, I feel at home in, which is very true. Like even driving around here, this can be considered the hood to a certain aspect. And I love it. Sometimes I feel at home. It's like I was driving down one of the streets and I was like, it feels like New York. Not like New York is really the hood, but when I lived there were certain parts that were, and there still are. Anyways, I'm going off track. Anyways, I lived in Tottenham. I lived with 4 other people who I was not vibing with, and I didn't vibe with them for 2 years. I think I lived there for 2 years. Yeah, we did not vibe. I tried. We just couldn't see each other eye to eye. It just, by the end of it, very toxic ending, and it is what it is. Anyway, during the pandemic, there was a park that I used to always walk to, and I created a relationship with that park. And my ex-boyfriend never understood it. He was like, why do you want to come here? This park is like, but I would just go there and I felt like the park was a person. And I felt like this park held me. This park, like I used to meditate in the park, like walk there at 6 a.m. and go there, or like just sit there and cry after feeling really shit, or just walk around and see the beautiful diversity that lives in this one area of Tottenham, or just in Tottenham period. I got to see so many different things happening. And I even ran into a friend that I didn't see for a long time, who I did my master's with, and we randomly ran into each other at this park. And this park just was kind of my safety place in London. And I had a relationship with it. It was its own entity. Yeah. Was
it beautiful?
To me, it was.
I kind of want to add, like, as you were, like, I think I know what you mean. The park over here, Dexter Park. Something grounding about it. There's something weird about establishing that kind of relationship with your surrounding and being like, well, this is at least a place I go nearby here. That's just like the lovely little place. And I've had plenty of instances at Dexter that are like unpleasant or whatever, that are not beautiful at all. And I've found needles and I've seen people doing weird things. Sure. And there are days where I'm just like, is this park as beautiful in reality as it is in my head? But every day. That's where her and I go.
Yeah.
And have her time and have my time. And that's where I met a new friend of mine over there. And it's just the sycamore trees are all lined up in this row. And it's just kind of home base away from home.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
You need that on the natural side as well as this structural safety that we have in a home.
Exactly.
You need that grass.
You do. Yeah. And it could be that. It can even be a bar that you like going to all the time, or a certain store, or like whatever it can be. It's just, I find, especially if you move to a new place, and as a person who travels a lot and loves traveling and loves, just up and leaving and uprooting, you need, those places are almost necessary, but they take time to discover. And so once you do, it's like they will always, the feeling of those places will always stick. But they're miracles once you find them, because they're not ones that you're going to be like, oh, it's like when you fall in love with somebody. It's like, you don't necessarily think you're going to fall in love with that person, but you just end up some way, somehow. It just flows into that. It's like that. You don't expect it. And so that's how it kind of has to flow. Yeah. And that's what I love. And that's what London gave me. And that's the story. That would be the story of London. Yeah. So
do you have little places like that kind of around the world in New York and in Rhode Island? And I mean, you do in London, obviously. You just named one.
They weren't, that one was like, that park is my homie.
Yeah,
like that's
a special one.
That park is my homie. When it comes down to like New York City, I didn't, there's so many beautiful places. Like I lived in Greenpoint at one point, and I lived right by the water, and that was a really sacred place, but it didn't feel as sacred as this place. This place was a lot more sacred than that. New York City, I feel like I didn't, although I love that, I was born there, so it's in my blood. That place is, I love that place forever and always, but I think my friends are that spot for me in New York City. There's that. And it's also just listening to the music outside. So it doesn't always have to be like a physical place. It's just listening to like salsa or whatever. It can be merengue or whatever. Just hearing Latin music outside. Yeah. That's it for me. That takes me to New York. And that's like my safety. That's like, oh, I love this. It makes me feel so good. There wasn't a specific place that I went to where I felt like I can be safe here. And New York didn't provide that for me in that sense, or I didn't find that in New York. In Paris, I didn't have that either. I had a very weird thing, or just things happened to me in Paris. It was very toxic in many ways. But I loved Paris. I don't know why, I just did. It was a toxic relationship. And I lived by the Sacré-Cœur. So it was like I lived by that big church thing, or I think it's not a church, I forgot what it is, but anyways, there's a big lawn and you can just people watch and see the whole view of Paris from there. And that was it for me. That was like, I'm gonna read here, I'm gonna people watch here. You can just get your baguettes and just eat right there with your beer if you want to, or wine or whatever. And that was my spot too. I like that, but it wasn't as sacred as that park. That park was like, that park is a homie. That's not, there's no, that's a specific feeling, but not, no other cities provided that for me.
This is one of my canon questions.
Sure.
Of all these risks that it sounds like you've taken and ventures. Well, I'll add the context, but the definition of venture that I kind of am attracted to for this podcast is to do with like, it's like a risk you're willing to take. It's like a risk that you are knowingly taking for, for some reason or another.
Yep.
What has been the greatest risks that you've taken in your life?
I think getting on stage every single time.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful risk for me. People might not see it as a risk, but psychologically, there's a lot going on, and emotionally, there's a lot going on, and you're being vulnerable. So that's always a risk. I think connecting with people is always a beautiful. Some people might not see that as a risk, but for me, I do, in one way or another, because you're being vulnerable. And for me, that's a thing, because I have social anxiety, so it's a thing. And I think, although I just lived in these places, I can up and move anytime. A part of me is very scared of doing that at the moment, but how I look back and I just did it blows my mind sometimes. of just like uprooting several times. And I even think it's a risk to ground yourself. That's probably a risk that I'm very scared to take, is commitment.
To being in one place?
To being in one place, yeah. And just being like, right, the roots are settling down.
That was my commitment for a while, and it was a risk.
Yes.
It was a risk of like not experiencing a bunch of other shit in life.
Yeah. And it's, you know, you're in your 30s, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just feel like I'm in this place where I can, you know, I had this opportunity to be in Berkeley, California for 3 weeks. I was going to do it. But I need a job. So I was like, Whitney, you got to stay for money. So I didn't do that. And I think it's also taking a risk just to ground yourself, like seeing what being in Providence this summer is going to offer me by just being here. Because last year I traveled a lot. And so what is it going to be like just to scope around Boston and Providence for the summer and see what happens? And that's a risk. It's commitment. Commitment is a risk. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Committing yourself to a person, a thing, you know, music, whatever. It's a risk.
Yeah. And even commitment to non-commit, even commitment to like, I'm just going to wander.
Yes.
That's a commitment to something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a choice. So, you know, that I think is, that's the risk that I'm taking at the moment, that I'm just opening my eyes to and being like, am I doing this? Do I really want to do this? And I think it's the time where I did it not for a person. And I didn't move to London for a person, but I stayed sometimes for people. And I'm doing this not for a person or for a certain thing. I'm just doing it because I'm, I guess, curious, but also because I'm scared. It's not scared, but it's like I don't know where else to go right now. Mm. There isn't like, you know, I'm not in love with someone that lives in a different city or whatever. I'm just like, I'm not being called anywhere else, but I'm just being called to ground myself. Mm. Yeah.
Well, okay. I think we're covered for the episode.
Lovely.
I think we will, but we can look forward. Definitely. I think we'll end up talking again, and who knows, maybe even doing some music stuff or something.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Whitney Sanchez, thank you for joining me in my introduction to Providence and helping me expand on it.
Of course. You're welcome. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks for checking out this episode of Venture. If you want to be one of the first people to access new episodes when they come out, I have a Patreon that is for my music as well as my podcasting interests. It is patreon.com/Tyler Nail. Feel free to join there.